Bradley Edwards is a Florida attorney who has represented over 200 victims of Jeffrey Epstein. He is the author of the book published in 2020, Relentless Pursuit: My Fight for the Victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And joining us now is Bradley Edwards. Mr. Edwards, first of all, I'd like your guidance on our coverage of this story with your clients in mind, with their ongoing suffering in mind, and the sensitivity of their feelings, and how, obviously, this involves the President of the United States. This coverage is going to continue. It's going to continue well into September, we now know, at least. Is there a way for us to handle this that is mindful of what your clients have already suffered?
There is a way. It's not the way that it has been handled thus far, and I think that's the problem, and that's why I agreed to come on the show, because I think that back in 2008, when I sued the government over Jeffrey Epstein's illegal non-prosecution agreement that Alex Acosta gave him, it was because the victims were an afterthought. And now it seems like the victims are not a thought at all. Somehow we've gone backwards, which is not okay. It's irresponsible of everyone. And I think that people really need to remember that real people were hurt here. And every single time that the over-politicizing of this issue comes up, they're hurt all over again. I've been contacted by dozens of clients in the last week, probably over 50, that are paranoid, have extreme anxiety and fear over the way in which this issue has been handled, the politicizing of it. And, give it a prime example. The call for the release of grand jury materials. First of all, everybody knows the grand jury materials is basically worthless. It's nothing. That's what you present to the grand jury before an arrest, before an indictment, before the raids, and before the accumulation of evidence. It's a red herring. But it causes the victims to go, wait, where's our voice? We didn't know about this. Luckily, the judicial system works, and the judges immediately said, wait, we're denying your request. Why? You haven't asked for the victims' opinions. So that at least the judges see the victims are being left out. I can tell you, despite that order from the judges, we still haven't been contacted. Our clients still haven't been asked about their opinions of the release of materials. Put the grand jury materials aside, the victims generally, and as you said, I've represented over 200 of them. Not every one of them is the same. But for the most part, all of them want to heal, and they deserve to heal. And the only way they're going to heal now is if full transparency happens. Release the files. Release everything in it except the victims' names. Protect the victims. Protect their privacy. Release everything else. There's no other reason to hold anything back than if somebody is trying to hold something or there's a cover-up. There's been enough of that. Release it, and release it fast. There's a solution to every single problem that has come up, and a quick solution. It doesn't seem like people want it. It seems like it's being driven by salivating over scandal as opposed to dissemination of the truth. One of the things being the birthday book. I have numerous clients who know of the authenticity and the existence of the birthday book. Of course, it was a birthday book that was given to Jeffrey Epstein on his 50th birthday by Ghislaine Maxwell. Jeffrey Epstein's dead. He has an estate. Everybody who knows anything about the story knows knows the estate exists, and it's being governed by the two executors, Darren Indyke, Jeffrey Epstein's former attorney, Richard Kahn, Jeffrey Epstein's former accountant. Those are the two executors. If somebody simply called them on the phone and said, give us the book, they would probably give you the book. They have attorneys. Their attorneys are good. Their attorneys are good people. If they didn't just voluntarily turn over the book out of fear of reprisal, Congress could issue a subpoena to their attorneys at Patterson or at Troutman. Those are the two law firms. I know those attorneys. They would turn the book over immediately. Nobody would have to guess. There wouldn't need to be a lawsuit. There wouldn't have to wait to be discovery. You would immediately have the answers. You could flip to the page. Is there a letter? Is there not a letter? It's over. The victims then get to move on. But that's not what's happening. And that's why I agreed to come on, because so many of them have called and said, somebody needs to remind them. Real people are being hurt here. The truth matters. Transparency actually matters. Get this over with and get it behind us.
I want to go to that book because with your familiarity with evidence against Jeffrey Epstein, which you've collected a lot of through the discovery process, What do you know specifically about that book? Do you know that the estate, the relatives of Jeffrey Epstein, in effect through their lawyers, are in possession of that birthday book?
Yes, I know that the executors of the estate are in possession of that book. And I think that after they turn it over, it should probably be set in the Smithsonian as an artifact at this point in time. It's going to go down in history so that the world can see this book, and they'll know who were Jeffrey Epstein's best friends at the time, what letters did his family write to him, what other pictures are in there, things of that nature. Redact victim names, release the book, and move on. So that's it. Yes, the executors have it.
So you've just identified, not just for the news media, but obviously for House representatives who are now in a mood to subpoena, and also Todd Blanche in the Trump Justice Department, who suddenly are getting curious about investigating this. You've now told them exactly, according to your knowledge, where the birthday book is, who is in possession of that book. And all the House representatives would have to do tomorrow is write up a subpoena for that book, and you believe that it would be the lawyers involved would comply with that subpoena?
I know the executors' lawyers. I've worked with them for years. They're good people. They're good lawyers. They would comply with the subpoena immediately. It's something that we could solve this problem so quickly if people actually want to solve problems. This idea, yeah, go ahead.
One more thing, Bradley. You said, I think you said that some of your clients have specific knowledge of that birthday book.
Sure. Yes, more than one, multiple of them.
And what is that knowledge? They saw it, or they were around him when he was 50 years old? Were they present at his birthday, his 50th birthday?
I don't know the answer to that last question. I do know that they were involved in the assembly of the book, several of them. They were told by Ghislaine to assist in putting the book together. Others have seen the book post birthday and after it was assembled. So the existence of the book is it's an absolute fact. Now, who wrote letters, what's in the book? You're going to have to get the book to figure it out. But this isn't something that needs to be a mystery forever and drag the victims into all kinds of anxiety for nothing. We can get that answer pretty quickly.
I knew you were going to tell us information about the whereabouts of the book. That I knew before we came on tonight. What I did not think of in all the reporting that's been done about this book and what you just said, which now seems obvious when you say it, is that some of Jeffrey Epstein's victims were actually used by Ghislaine Maxwell to assemble that birthday book, to actually put those letters together in that book.
Yeah, well, you have to remember that Jeffrey Epstein was abusing and exploiting young women and children every day of his life. So anybody that's around for any major event, such as the assembly of his 50th birthday book, they're going to have to be involved in assembling or playing their part, whatever they were directed to do, with respect to that book. So yes, more than one was involved.
And just to that last point, you said every day of his life, the evidence that you acquired through the discovery process in representing your clients indicates to you that Jeffrey Epstein was committing this kind of rape with girls from middle school and high school, as you just put it, every day of his life.
Well, I would just, the only caveat being young children and young women, probably all under the age of 25. But yes, you're right, as young as 14. And I think that we've represented 50 that were under the age of 18. But it wasn't only minors, just that caveat. I think that the one thing that has really alarmed our clients, particularly today, is the information that now Ghislaine Maxwell is being visited in jail, and that she is somehow being given some credibility and a platform on this particular topic. I think what people are forgetting is that Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't only indicted on sex trafficking charges. Ghislaine Maxwell, because of testimony she gave on multiple occasions in the civil cases where we sued her, she provided testimony, and as a consequence of false testimony, she was indicted on 2 perjury counts on this particular topic. So we're going to go and ask somebody to tell the truth who was indicted on perjury charges related to this particular topic. Now, does she have information that could potentially help? Yes. Will she be truthful about it? Who knows? But whoever is going to be the questioner, whoever's going to be the interrogator, must know more than just a rudimentary understanding of the case. You have to have seen her other deposition transcripts to know what she said so that you can keep her in line. You have to know her testimony from her criminal trial to keep her in line, and you have to understand the case. Sending somebody there that knows nothing, she's going to say whatever she wants to say. And what's her incentive? Is her incentive because she's going to get a deal? I have many clients who say, look, President Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell were good friends back then. Is he going to commute her? Is he going to pardon her? And I have said to them, look, I know that you feel like an afterthought right now. I know that you feel like you don't matter. For him to do that would be he thought about you and he decided you do not matter. I don't think that is on the table. I don't think that he would ever do that. Maybe I'm putting too much trust in him. Maybe I am. But either way, if he's not going to do that, what incentive does she have to tell him anything if she's getting nothing out of it? So there's a big problem here with the process, and it's just another piece of the scandal that is causing enormous anxiety. Let's all remember there were 5 victims at the heart of the sex trafficking trial against Ghislaine Maxwell. 2 are no longer with us. Mm-hmm. They're dead. We're losing clients because of the anxiety and the suffering of them and their families. And they should be the first thought that every single American has when they think about this case. They shouldn't be an afterthought, and they shouldn't be forgotten. And that's how it feels to them and to me.
And just for the audience, the 2 that you mentioned, both clients of yours, one took her own life a few months ago, and another died of apparent drug overdose last year. Attorney Bradley Edwards, thank you very much for your invaluable perspective on this tonight and what you've revealed to us about your knowledge about that birthday book and how it can be obtained. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Lawrence. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. The breaking news just minutes ago right here on MSNBC is that Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book that contains a letter that bears Donald Trump's name is in the possession of the Epstein estate in Florida, and the estate lawyers would respond to a subpoena.
Congress could issue a subpoena to their attorneys at Patterson or at Troutman. Those are the 2 law firms. I know those attorneys. They would turn the book over immediately. Nobody would have to guess. There wouldn't need to be a lawsuit. There wouldn't have to wait to be discovery. You would immediately have the answers. You could flip to the page. Is there a letter? Is there not a letter? It's over.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California, member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman Khanna, you have been the driving force in the House of Representatives to get the Epstein files released to the House. Does it sound like it's time to maybe move for a subpoena to get that book?
Yes, Lawrence. First of all, that was a bombshell revelation by Bradley Edwards. I appreciate your having me on to hear that. It's important what he said, that we have to center the victims in this. And it's important to hear what he believes the victims want, which is the full, complete release of the Epstein files. We're hearing directly that's what the victims want. Second, it is a revelation to me that he said that that birthday book is with private lawyers in the Epstein estate. As you know and reported earlier, Summer Lee showed courageous leadership today on the Oversight Committee. We subpoenaed the Epstein files, but that's a hard thing to do, to get the Department of Justice to cooperate in releasing those files. What's not hard to do is to subpoena private attorneys in a private estate and to get compliance. So I'm actually going to invite Bradley Edwards to meet with the House Oversight Committee, and I think we can easily move forward on this subpoena of that birthday book, and which could really advance this case.
And this really does change the nature of the story. This is Donald Trump has said that the letter doesn't exist. He said it's non-existent. And so if this birthday book can be obtained, if you can obtain it, you can give us the answer of exactly how Donald Trump is or is not represented in that book.
Absolutely. We will know if the letter the Wall Street Journal reported on, if that is in the book or not, or if there are any other letters or correspondence of Donald Trump in the book. We also will know whether hundreds of other people who have been implicated in sex trafficking are in the book. And of course, we would take absolute care to make sure the victims are protected. But the biggest thing I heard tonight is that this is what the victims want. And this should not be a political issue. This should be an issue for justice. And I think it's really courageous that Bradley Edwards came on your program. I appreciate him doing that. And this guidance is very helpful for our committee, because we can't trust the Trump Justice Department. That is going to get slowed down. It's going to get bogged down. Even if we subpoena, they can try to defy the subpoena. I don't trust the DOJ to prosecute themselves for contempt of Congress. But what we can do through Congress is go after these Jeffrey Epstein estate. And we've seen even Republicans are willing to vote with us on that. This may be the cleanest way forward.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much for joining our breaking news coverage tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, we'll be back with Andrew Weissman. We'll get his reaction to what he just learned about the Jeffrey Epstein birthday book and how it can be obtained now through subpoena. We'll be right back with Andrew Weissman.
Congress could issue a subpoena to their attorneys at Patterson or at Troutman. Those are the two law firms. I know those attorneys. They would turn the book over immediately. Nobody would have to guess. There wouldn't need to be a lawsuit. There wouldn't have to wait to be discovery. You would immediately have the answers. You could flip to the page. Is there a letter? Is there not a letter? It's over.
Andrew Weissman is back with us. And Andrew, I suspect that Ro Khanna and the House of Representatives might be in a subpoena race right now with the Trump Justice Department. It is entirely possible that the Trump Justice Department could issue a subpoena immediately to try to obtain that birthday book from the estate in Florida that Bradley Edwards just identified is in possession of the Epstein birthday book, which is supposed to contain a letter that bears Donald Trump's name. Is it possible that the Justice Department could just subpoena that first thing tomorrow morning, get possession of it, and no one would ever see it?
That is possible. It is also possible that they actually have it already. You remember that the Department of Justice has said that they have 30 gigabytes of information pursuant to this investigation. Remember, this case went to trial. So there's been a thorough investigation before today. And so we don't know the full complement of everything they have. I should also point out, in addition to the point that your guest made, which was just wonderful, is that what you could subpoena from the estate is not just the birthday book, but if it's the estate of Jeffrey Epstein, they may have a whole repository of information about what he was doing and detailed records of who he was doing it with. And so the subpoena does not have to be so narrowly tailored that it's just asking for this. The other thing, Lawrence, I just want to make a point of the real issue here that people shouldn't forget is the callousness of the Department of Justice and what it's doing. The victims had a right to notice. They had a right to be heard before any motion was made to make anything public. Their voices are statutorily required to be heard, and the judges vindicated that. But you have the Deputy Attorney General ignoring the law, and it really sends a red flag that this is being done for political purposes, that you would ignore the victims in a case like this. Presumably that is why the case was brought, was to vindicate their rights. And you're seeing that thrown away, and I think that's the real message from your last guess.
So to stay on the birthday book for another minute, is it possible that the estate has the original and that the Epstein files in the Justice Department have a copy of it?
Yes, absolutely, or vice versa. It is quite typical when I did investigations that we would, if necessary, have the original. but leave a copy. And sometimes it would be the reverse because we didn't need to have the original. Sometimes you want that for evidentiary value. But this is the kind of thing that it wouldn't be beyond the possibility, but I think it would be unlikely that prosecutors as adept as those in the Southern District of New York who had this case, that they would not have seen this already, even if they didn't take the original.
Yeah, and at the end, when the Epstein suicide happens, that case is over. Is there a point in processes like that where the prosecutors have possession of material that they've obtained, where they simply say, okay, we're handing this back because it has no evidentiary value for us. We're not using this in court, so we're going to give this original back?
That does happen, but it wouldn't have happened in this case at this point. Why? Because Ghislaine Maxwell still was going to trial, and her case is not over. There still is an appeals process. In fact, in a request for FOIA documents, that is for the public release of documents, there was litigation over that. The Department of Justice took the position that they couldn't turn things over because the Ghislaine Maxwell case was still ongoing because of that appeals process. While that is ongoing, you do not return evidence because you don't know if you may need it going forward. So I would find it highly unlikely that that material would have been turned back over to a private party at this point.
And just to underline your point, the procedure to get grand jury testimony released requires you to, first of all, get notice to possible victims in that testimony and make sure it's okay with them. And the Trump Justice Department didn't do that, which seems to make their attempt to get the grand jury information released just a legally phony attempt.
It is a complete phony red herring, in my view. As you pointed out in your initial introduction, any single day of the week, this minute, there are 30 gigabytes of investigative material that presumably a huge portion of that is not grand jury material. The government does not need court authorization to turn that over.
Andrew Weissman, I'm going to need you back here tomorrow night. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
See you tomorrow.
Tonight, new reporting on the Justice Department telling Trump his name is in the Epstein files, what the White House is saying and what it means for the political fallout over the case. Then, a judge denies the DOJ's request to unseal the Epstein grand jury transcripts. Plus, Trump's trade war gets real. How long can companies absorb the financial hit before they pass it along to consumers? As the 11th hour gets underway on this Wednesday night. Good evening, I'm Ali Velshi in for my friend Stephanie Ruhle. Welcome to the Midweek Nightcap. It is day 185 of the second Trump administration, and outrage over the Epstein files is not dying down. Today, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Justice Department told President Trump in May that his name appeared in the Epstein files, along with many others. Now, as the Wall Street Journal points out, being mentioned in the records is not a sign of wrongdoing. In response, the Department of Justice said that the president was made aware of the findings in their review of the Epstein case during a routine briefing, and that nothing warranted further investigation or prosecution. While a White House spokesperson said in part, quote, "This is nothing more than a continuation of the fake news stories concocted by the Democrats and the liberal media, just like the Obama Russiagate scandal," end quote. All right, Trump has been trying to draw attention away from Epstein by going after President Obama. Today, Director of National Security Tulsi Gabbard joined the White House press briefing to repeat a conspiracy theory promoted by the president that President Obama ordered an investigation into Russia and the 2016 election in order to hurt Trump. And in Florida, a judge has denied the Attorney General's request to unseal Epstein grand jury transcripts from the investigation there, writing that the court's hands are tied. All right, with that, let's bring in our nightcap MSNBC senior political analyst Matthew Dowd. He's also a former George W. Bush strategist and founder of Country Over Party. Molly Jong-Fast, special correspondent for Vanity Fair and an MSNBC contributor, and Evan McMorris Santoro, reporter for Notice. Welcome to all of you, friends. Thank you for being with us. Molly, this Stephen Chung, the White House press guy, who put out the statement that this is another invention of the liberal media and the Democrats. Interesting theory, except this story, this continued story about the Epstein files and lists wouldn't exist but for, mostly speaking, Republicans, but extreme conspiracy theorists.
Well, there are so many parts of this statement that are untrue, or let me rephrase, not accurate. But the one that I think of is that the Wall Street Journal, which published this is the sort of second Epstein story, is owned by a 94-year-old Republican named Rupert Murdoch, who is as responsible for creating Trump as anyone. So I would say that the liberal media is not in play here.
Yeah, and Evan, the interesting thing is there were a lot of people who didn't know or think that there was that much more there. But the events of the last couple of weeks have made all sorts of people across the political spectrum awfully curious about what's not being released and why.
You know, it wasn't long ago that we were talking about this Trump administration, this Trump time being about this incredibly well-oiled machine of like just everything functions so cleanly. And over the past couple of weeks, I'll tell you, my colleague Jasmine Wright and I at Notice Newsletter, we've been reporting on this. And the White House, at first, they thought, we can stop this. We can just come out there, we put an end to it. Then they said, actually, okay, we can contain this. We can contain this. We know how to contain this. Now they sort of resignedly say, okay, well, I think we can weather this. But we have to weather it, right? Like, this is a thing that, somebody said at my office the other day that we should rename the Streisand effect the Epstein effect, right? Because this is sort of like one of the biggest self-owns I've ever personally covered, right? This administration sort of came in on the winds of this Epstein story. They put in a lot of very senior people from the Epstein conspiracy world into senior positions, and then those people couldn't deliver enough for the conspiracists.
Right.
And now the administration is sort of flopping around trying to figure out how to, get their way out of that.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, Matthew, that they've got all sorts of people on the outside that they can't sort of control the messaging. Donald Trump's tried everything. He's called them names. He's decided he wants the Washington Commanders to change their name. Everything. We're making trade deals with countries I didn't know we traded with. But they've still got Dan Bongino as the deputy director of the FBI. And this is confusing because depending on whom you ask, they're like, they want him to stay because he can do less damage inside than if he goes back to being a podcaster and talking about this. But there's lots of right-wing podcasters who are out there talking about this.
Well, there's a ton, including one of the ones with the largest brand. And, Joe Rogan's still talking about this every day in the course of this. To me, this is I have not noticed Donald Trump off his game in probably 10 years I've watched this. And every single thing he reaches in his bag of tricks, he's tried. He reaches in Hillary emails, it hasn't worked. He reaches in President Obama, it hasn't worked. All of his normal tricks in this case haven't worked, primarily because, as was discussed, this is a conspiracy theory pushed by the right wing that he doesn't, he thought he had control of and he thought he could deal with in the course of this. The other part of this that I think is fascinating is there's a scene in the movie Justice League, at the end of the movie Justice League when all the, they band together to fight this thing called Steppenwolf. And he has all these things called the parademons that are his sort of minions that are that. At the very end, the parademons start attacking Steppenwolf.
Right.
And Aquaman turns to Batman and says, "You smell that?" And then Batman says, "Yeah, it's fear." And I think that's what's going on. I think you can see it in the speaker's mind. You can see it in Donald Trump. You can see it in the staff because they know that this is a one word. Anything with a one word is always a good scandal.
Right.
And it doesn't go away until it's finally exhausted. And they know full well that Donald Trump has an attachment to this. There is video. There's all sorts of things that they know that, but they don't know all the extent of it. And I think they're in fear. And I think that smartly, the Democrats smell it. And the media smells it, which is great for the media to investigate this story. And Donald Trump doesn't normally operate from a place of fear.
Yeah. I'm going to get back to this. You made a comment about the speaker. We're going to talk about the politics of this in a minute. We were in the green room together, Molly. We were watching a little bit of Lawrence's Amazing Hour. Mm-hmm. It was hard to sort of focus on the show while I was watching what he was doing. And he has made possibly the most important point in all of this. There are real victims of this case. And they've been long ignored. Yeah. And for all the people who are trying to figure out what's in these files, we're still not hearing a whole lot about the devastation that was imposed upon these victims, these girls.
Yeah, I think Lawrence had a really good point. I mean, I think he used the word children. Right?
Yeah.
They're between the ages of 14 and 18, and the testimony that he read was pretty brutal about these girls aging out of Epstein visits.
At 18.
At 18.
Yeah.
No, agreed. And look, there are, I mean, we're living in like backlash to backlash to backlash. So we have been, in Me Too, and then this weird post-Me Too nightmare. And now we're back to some kind of accountability, maybe, but still no one is talking about the victims. And look, the thing about Epstein is also this case, people keep finding. I mean, CNN's Andrew Kaczynski today found that Epstein was at Trump's second wedding. That's very, all of this is just very inconvenient. And these two men were friends for a long time, is the reporting. And so there's just going to be more and more photos. And it just seems like it's unclear to me how you can end a news cycle with so much possible material.
That's why I think what Lawrence did was so important, because I think too often, whatever the story is, we don't cover the victims enough of it.
Correct.
And that could be on tariffs.
Sure.
That we talk about tariffs, and is Donald Trump going to negotiate this, and we forget about 22 businesses went out of business because of this, or whatever the thing happens to be, or the healthcare crisis.
Yeah.
Donald Trump was able to push this through, and we debate the process, and we don't say, well, what happened?
Yeah, if we're going to dredge the story up again, then let's do it the right way this time. Let's talk about
that's why I think the victims, and Donald Trump, it always does well, because he always wants to ignore the victims of everything he's done in his life.
Right.
He wants to ignore the victims of his
Well, he called this a non-story.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
Nobody
a non-story,
cares.
not for the hundreds of women or hundreds of children that went through this.
Yeah. Evan, a number of reporters have noted that when this first came out, there was a general feeling in Washington that all the various ways you described that this will blow over, they'll get past it. And now everybody understands they're not going to the extent that Speaker Johnson has decided the House, everybody's going home.
That's right.
So as not to vote on a resolution about this.
That's right. I mean, the Democrats have sort of grabbed onto this, and it's not just Democrats. There's a bunch of Republicans who are joining in with them, and it became
enough to force a vote, enough to have done this so that Johnson had to tell everybody to go home.
That's right. I mean, to make the their Congress leave early. Yeah. It's a remarkable scene, right? I mean, this is a thing that actually this literally ground the government to a halt. That's literally how serious this is. But to what you're saying before, the substance of this really does touch kind of everybody. No party comes off clean in this story. You want to get in the substance of it. The politics, though, the way the politics have been played out, they really do just touch Trump at this moment. That's the problem that they have, is that originally the idea was this was a political way to get the Democrats. Right? We're going to get the Democrats. We're going to get these names out from this list, and we're going to take these Democrats down. And the problem has been that once they got in, it came around and sort of blew back right on them. So there is this conversation about the substance that's very important. It's a very serious story, but that issue is a structural issue about a lot of problems in our society that people like Epstein could saunter around in powerful places with nobody really stopping them for a long time. But this is a political story now, and the politics are really Trump's problem, I think.
Molly, how do you see this unfolding? Because something's got to give. I think Mike Johnson, who I think is pretty savvy sometimes, I think he's miscalculated this. The idea that these Republican members of Congress are going to go spend 5 weeks with their constituents who are mad at them about all sorts of things, and then this is not going to affect them, I think is just bad math.
Well, and there's still so much more content out there, right? This has been just 2 weeks of people digging. Imagine what they're going to find in another 5 weeks. I think Mike Johnson is really over his skis here. He was kind of installed at the privilege of Donald Trump, right? He got his job because Trump liked him. And he's not a whip counter. The times when he's had a lot of failures whipping the vote. The times when he's been able to get the numbers he's needed has been when Donald Trump has literally called people and been like, you need to vote this way. Or when Elon, that first time for the CR, when Elon and Trump both called people. I think the reason he sent people home was because he didn't know how his members were going to vote. And I think that's an important thing. And again, it's important to remember that this is like, we have sat here for a decade and been like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And Trump's base had been like, no, we love it. And all of a sudden, here's a scandal where Trump's base is like, this is not okay.
Right.
And I think that's really the most important thing about this.
Matt, how does this? How do you fix that problem? Because the base is the base. They're there. Clearly, they're not buying whatever Donald Trump's selling at the moment. How serious a problem do you think this ends up being for Donald Trump and Republicans?
Well, I think about the country and when it votes is in thirds. So I think there's a third of the country that may not like part of this story, but is going to follow if it's going to fall in line.
Right.
And then the third of the country, which is the sort of Democrats, which is no matter what it is, if even Donald Trump did something really positive, they're not going to see it that way, and whatever. And then there's the third, which bleeds into some of the MAGA folks. Mm-hmm. And also then the other part of that third bleeds into some of the Democrats at different times. That's the third they have to worry about. Right. Because when you head into a midterm and you only have a third, and I think what it's going to do mostly is demotivate the Republicans. Mm-hmm. They're going to be like, he didn't do anything about inflation. He's messed up this Epstein thing, which we thought it was going to all blow on the Clintons, which is what their ultimate goal was. Right. They were going to catch Bill Clinton. Correct. And throw, that's who was going to be thrown away in the course of this. Now the person that looks like it's going to affect, as Evan said, is Donald Trump. That's what I would be worried about if I were the Republicans, the demotivation of the base in a midterm election in the course of this. The other part that they completely miscalculated, I think, is they think protecting Donald Trump will help them in the midterms. Yeah. That didn't go well in 2018. Mm-hmm. The last time they did this, they got their butts handed to them in the midterms in 2018 at governor's races, Senate races, and House races because they sought to protect Donald Trump. I don't understand if they're their own self-preservation, why they think protecting Donald Trump when they can watch the same videos we do.
Right.
And they know Donald Trump's history. I mean, the Donald Trump's history, it's like, this is not like some shock that he would end up on Epstein Island or on Epstein's plane because of his history in this. That's the part I don't think. They think that protect him will protect them, and it never has.
But they're scared of him. I mean, they're scared of the tweets. That's why they've been protecting him this whole time. I don't think that there's even a political calculus here as much as just fear. The thing when you were talking about this before, Tony Fabrizio, Trump's pollster, had that sort of about 10% of his base is like real conspiracy-minded. There's a sort of more attractive word for it that he uses, but that is about 10% of his base, and that is the difference between.
But yes, you get right. That's a lot in our electoral cycles. Have you ever seen? I mean, this is kind of crazy. Every 6 hours, the White House comes out with something new. Going back to renaming the stadium in Washington, then it was Martin Luther King files. Then today it was Obama. I mean, they're really, I don't know what's left in their toolbox. They are trying everything to distract from this conversation.
Yeah, look, I mean, I barely made it onto the show tonight because I was having to finish my newsletter because as I was coming over here, the White House said, we're going to the Fed tomorrow. Trump is going to the Fed. He's going to show up. He's going to check out that marble himself.
4 o'clock, he's going to go over to the Fed to now discuss this whole thing about the renovations.
That's right. But this sort of like, surprise!
The President of the United States.
This is what they've been doing, right?
Yeah.
They've been doing a lot of this, and this is sort of classic political maneuvering, right? You move around, you shift things around. The thing is, what they thought they had behind them was what they've had behind them before, which is this sort of MAGA media sphere that Trump can activate. Because that's part of how he gets the Congress to get on his side, right? Is that like you don't want to go and get yelled at by all these MAGA media people who are going to come after you. Right. This one, he went on. He called to these people. He said, look, if you are still into this, you're not a supporter of me, like, come on, everybody. And it's those people who are not being pulled off of it. They have not been distracted, right? The mainstream media, we chase all the stuff he sends around. That's our job to do. But but this MAGA media that he needs to say, okay, we're moving on.
They're not doing it. It's I'm an economics correspondent. Like when I saw the Fed thing, in a normal world, that would have stopped me in my tracks to say, oh, I got to cover this. It's like I've even lost track of it because they're just throwing things into the pile. The president's going to see the Federal Reserve tomorrow. Everybody's sticking around. Coming up, American companies are getting pounded by Donald Trump's tariffs. And for now, they are absorbing some of the costs. But what happens when American shoppers start paying the price? But first up, after the break, after a judge's ruling, we are no closer to seeing any Epstein files than we were a couple of weeks ago. We'll talk about what's next and if we'll ever see any grand jury transcripts next. The 11th hour just getting underway on a Wednesday night.